for those old enough to remember that. There's only a few of us here, but that will remember that. But nonetheless, thank you all for your attendance, your help and support to get us to the meeting this evening, and for your support during the meeting. So thank you for that. And we will. I've just a quick announcement to make on this, and I'm reliably assured and informed by Justin that I do have this discretion, and that will be that we will move members' question time to the end of the meeting, and unless there's no real concerns about that. So let's move on. Apologies and substitutions. So substitutions, we have Councillor Luciani is here for Councillor Stevens. Councillor Stewart here is for Councillor Garrett. That's the only substitutions we have. Apologies. Okay, that's fine. The minutes, page 7 to 16 of our last meeting. We need to confirm that's true record. I'd need a proposal second. Thank you. Proposed by Councillor Jarman, seconded by Councillor Brodie. Sorry, Ed, get your hand up quicker. Those in favour of accepting the minutes as true record, those against, those abstaining, that's because we weren't here. Thank you. Public question time. Well, I'm aware of one public question at least, he said, which is, okay, so I'm aware of one public question. There are no members of the public apart from this, so I will read this out and with our answer also. And the question is from a Mr. Ian Boyd to the chair of the Policy, Finance and Resource Committee, and he asks how much additional income has been collected during the first quarter, that's April to June, from the new 100% council tax premium on second homes, compared to the expected or budgeted amount, and how does the current best estimate of the full year 2025-2026 outturn in additional income compared with the figures of 5.4 million that was assumed within the council's budget agreed in February. And our reply is as follows. So during the first quarter, 1.5 million of the 5.9 million of charges raised for the council tax premium has been raised, with most charge payers paying on a monthly basis. Based on the profile of payments to date, we have a lower estimate and an upper estimate of collection between 5.1 million and 5.9 million, with a midpoint estimate of 5.5 million as the ultimate collection. That's our reply to that question. Thank you all. There are no further public questions. So having moved members' question time to the end, we will move on. Declarations of interest. Oh, yes. Thank you for that. I need to do declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There are no declarations. That's noted. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to receive and consider these the items as item 6 on our agenda, and the first item, item A, is the service performance and improvement Q1, including annual complaints report. This is our page 17 to 288. It's a lot of pages, but nonetheless, is this you, Chris? You're not doing this. Claire, Alex. Hello, Claire.
Hi there, and my apologies that I'm not in person and in the room for this item. I will be in the future, just unfortunately circumstances this evening did not allow me to be on island. So I I have to confess that I managed to miss the first part of the item, so I'm assuming we're referring to the what's it called? The name's gone right out of my head. Can you remind me what the name of the title of the report is?
Quarterly performance report.
That's the one. Thank you. Yes, slight brain drain. So yes, so thank you for inviting me to introduce the report, leader. This is I think the first of the new format of these reports, in which it gives you the overview of specifically performance related measures relating to the Corporate Services Directorate. But you'll see it also includes within the appendices reference to all of the other performance reports that will be going to the other service committee meetings. And the purpose of doing so is to provide you as the Policy and Resources Committee, as the overarching committee, with oversight of wider performance within the council. Hopefully the report is self-explanatory in terms of the specifics around corporate services, but if there's anything that I can answer in terms of any general questions, then obviously please do let me know.
Thanks for that, Claire. Are there any questions? Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just a quick comment. Some of the use of cumulative data is presented in line graphs, which is odd. It's particularly in things like seasonal data, because it's very hard to pick up on trends. You have to read the gradient of the graph. It's a bit like you doing it in a pie chart rather than just doing it in a normal bar chart. So if that can be looked at. Also in the Environment Committee, we asked for statutory information to be highlighted, and I think that'd be useful across the whole council rather than just in that, particular thing, just so we're aware of what is extra data, and then also that can feed back into Colin's request for us to put in extra data requirements that we may or may not want. Second one, my questions around the FOI numbers, that they have been going up.
Yeah.
My understanding is that a lot of people are putting in requests, and a perfectly reasonable question, one would assume, is being deemed as taking more than 20 hours to answer, therefore is not being asked, and therefore resulting in more inquiries going in with broken down questions. So is there an awareness of that within the FOI team, and is there anything being done to better improve the performance of the FOI team, given they are a small amount and of numbered, and they might get overwhelmed with these extra questions coming in?
Yes, thank you. An interesting question, one that I may need to go and investigate further, Councillor Blake, but I'm not aware of any particular trends that we're seeing with regards to questions posed that may tip over that time limit and being referred back in smaller chunks. But I can certainly ask the question and report back to the committee. I mean, obviously, as you rightly say, the team are small in number. The time limit is something that's a national measure in terms of how long something is going to take to produce. But overall, I think whilst the numbers are increasing, I think that's just a general thing about people inquiring about specific aspects of the council's work. And as you'll see from the tables themselves, the completion rate within the deadlines is overall still pretty good.
Thanks, Claire. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. And I also want to ask a question about FOIs, slightly different from Councillor Blake's. Claire, if you could, page 30 of our agenda refers to the percentage of FOI requests completed within the statutory time scale.
Yeah.
And obviously, Councillor Blake has referred to increase in numbers, and the there's some narrative here about that, and clearly we've fallen away in the last couple of months in terms of the percentage, which is down to 84%. I mean, I don't want to interrogate that. I know it's a small team, etc. What I'm interested in, is there anything that can be done so that we can get that back up to 100% or near? I mean, we've never reached 100% on the graph I have in front of me, but at least get it back up to about 95%, because FOIs are important to the people who ask them, and they're important in terms of transparency and accountability of a local authority. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, happy to take that away, Councillor Brodie, and look into that. I perhaps should have also said that although there is a small internal legal services FOI team, the majority of the information is produced by departments themselves. So they coordinate the overall, scene on FOIs. So it is often dependent on the availability of resources and staffing resources to gather information from within departments. And as we know, at times of the year, depending on what's happening within the council, there will be higher pressures than at other times. But certainly I can take that feedback away and see what we might be able to do by way of further improving the outcome. As I said, as you say, it has dropped a little bit, and that potentially may be due to the increase in numbers in this particular quarter. But recognising, as you rightly say, that FOIs are important to people and they want to receive the information as soon as they possibly can.
Thanks, Claire. Just before I come to you, Chris, if I may, because it's related to that. Claire, it doesn't impact this figure for this year, but wasn't there a change at one point where when information was requested, it had to be considered as an FOI rather than just a question of council? That wasn't the legislation changed on that? First thing. And second thing is, are the media now just as a matter of course sending FOIs in, where in the past they may have asked our media team for the information? Has that been a change?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the very first question, which I believe what you said was, has there been a change in the requirements for matters to be considered as an FOI? I'm not aware of any specific statutory changes around that, Leader. I think the issue for us always is doing the check of what constitutes an FOI, and the tests that are associated around that. Your second question, which was around media, I would have to delve a little bit further into the detail, but I am aware that we do get quite a number of media requests that come through as FOIs. In terms of the percentage and number, I'm not clear, but I could find that out for you.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor John.
Good evening, Claire. We've had a few examples recently where member questions have been sent in, and after a period of time, they've been referred to the FOI team, even though they've not been presented as an FOI. Often after some rather protracted delay in the group, one would have expected them in past times simply to have answered. The clock with the FOI team starts when they receive it, which then adds another 28 days to the cycle, which is often quite unfortunate. Is that a policy that we have somehow adopted, i.e. to change what would seem to be a normal pattern of members asking questions into deferral after some period to the FOI team, and then to wait, in one case 26 days, in the other one 27 days, until it was answered? Because that seems to be very counterproductive in terms of members making progress with their responsibilities. Thank you.
Yes, of course, and I'm conscious that there are some governance matters that surround the matters around provision of information, and it might be better articulated by one of our legal colleagues in that respect. It's a matter really that in terms of information that's being sought, there has to be an understanding, or there must be an understanding of how best that information is to be provided and where the request best sits. And that's not about denying people any access to information. It's about ensuring that that the information is being asked for and provided within the bounds of the council's governance arrangements. So I think there's possibly been some areas whereby there is a need to validate and understand the request for information, which on occasion may have been necessary to refer through the FOI route. I'm happy to provide a more detailed response to that question outside of the meeting, which may more helpfully set that out for you.
Claire, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Claire. We'll look forward to that. The next question I had related to item 9, which is on page 18 of the document, where we talk about performance. And I think when we often talk about openness and transparency, I understand that complaints by the Ombudsman which are upheld are published by the Ombudsman online, but we don't seem to publish them very often in the council. And I wonder, rather than just quoting 11 of them being upheld, if we could receive a list of what those were, please. If we're looking at process improvement, which is clearly one of the remits here, we need to understand what areas need improvement. And that would seem to be quite material information into that process. Thank you.
Okay.
You're going to take that away, Claire? Yeah.
Yes, I will do. Yeah. Of course I will.
Thank you. Any further questions? I think before we move on, there's been a number of questions inferring concerns about the FOI. I would just say from the committee perspective, we want to understand that, because it has an impact on all of you as staff and the costs involved in providing that information. That's why we're asking. We're not trying to get at.
Yeah, no, absolutely understand that. Yeah.
It's for noting where. Oh, Jonathan, Councillor Bacon.
Fine, sir. Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you, Leader. Yes, my question actually goes to the other end of the report, page 280, which is part of the report looking at complaints performance. And just going through the complaints and the statistics presented there, I felt there were 3 lines that jumped out rather, and I wondered if we could ask for some explanation is probably not the right word, but comment on those. I'll set out all 3 and then perhaps responses can follow. First, on page 280, blue badges. It's a low number of complaints, 9, but all were allowed, and that struck me. Secondly, special educational needs. I know a very difficult area. Obviously, I had some involvement with that in the past when we had a cabinet system, but I note 43 complaints and 32 were upheld. And over the page, I was quite surprised to see this one, but household waste and recycling, 170 complaints and 153 upheld. I'd say those 3 lines jumped out from the report, and I wonder if there's anything, and I see there were learning outcomes in respect of each of those lines, and indeed most of the entries on that document, but I wonder if there's some additional comment that might be made.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm in a position to be able to answer them right at this particular point. They are not my service areas. But I'll be more than happy to pull together a briefing note alongside all the other points that have been raised for the committee.
Thank you. Just before we do it, can we've made notes of those questions. Are you happy if we get those a response and circulated by email, or would you like it brought back to a following meeting? We'll circulate the answer by email. Thank you. Councillor Blake, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon, for sending me that page of the documents, because I was looking for my extra turn down page and there it was on 279. My question is actually almost the opposite of that. Actually, on the previous couple of pages, we've got a lot of complaints not upheld, and I'm just wondering if that's around a lack of knowledge, perhaps from the public, due to the fact that we don't give out much information on what our service providers should actually be providing, and therefore they're complaining about they're not getting something potentially that they are not entitled to. Is that a fair observation?
Again, I'd obviously need to look into the detail, Councillor Blake, and I'll happily include that in the note that I provide to you. It's a very valid point.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Councillor Blake. Councillor John again.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I got a bit confused there. I thought we were on Appendix 1 still, but we jumped forward to a different appendix now. Or are we doing all appendices at the same time? Okay. Right. So it's an awful lot of pages.
Sorry, Chris, just to come in. Isn't it appropriate for us only to be looking at the corporate directorate performance report? The other ones are provided for information and background, but they go to the relevant committees, because otherwise we're just duplicating.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not spend the next God knows how long going through all the adult social care one, all the children's service, not because I'm lazy, but I haven't prepared for it either. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, you make a valid point, I believe. I think looking around the membership, we would tend to agree with those sentiments and comments.
It's if I may, Leader, it is an important point to make, and Councillor Broad is quite correct. But just to be clear, that the complaints element does sit within corporate services. A bit confusing, I'm sure, in terms of the way in which all the appendices are presented, but that definitely comes within corporate services. I'm perhaps less familiar with complaints, only because my colleague Sharon Betts led on this service area, and I'm just in the process of repicking this area back up. So hopefully in future I'll be much better informed than I am currently, but I'll certainly respond to all the questions that you've asked.
Thanks, Claire. Are we happy therefore, Councillor John?
I'll continue. No worries, Jeff. What I'll do then is all of the questions I've got on appendices 2 through to the last to 7, I'll submit to the various officers who are here individually, because there are quite a few questions, 41 in fact. But staying on the corporate bit alone, the only other question I had on that section was related to the ICT services, which is corporate. We noted that there were 4 occurrences of a cyber attacker accessing third-party information, and I wondered if we had some way of identifying what that was, more importantly, what the implications of that were and what's been done to mitigate against the future.
Yes, of course, and obviously in a public forum it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for me to be giving the details of any investigations that may have been undertaken around cyber attacks, which I hope you'll understand. But suffice it to say that I'm sure you'll appreciate that there are, there's what's been reported in the report are 4 specific events, but there's constant threats to any of the council's systems from cyber attack, and the council has in place what I believe to be fairly robust, they are robust systems that enable us to monitor and respond to those things. So what's actually reported within the append or the report itself are those where we know there has been a specific attack that has alerted us to need to take more formal action. There is a process in place to deal with any such events. There's a very clear, what we call a playbook in terms of responding to such an event and who needs to be involved in those processes. As far as I'm aware, that those particular ones reported were able to be resolved without any significant impact to the local authority. And you know, we undertake due reporting to the relevant agencies as necessary, so that they can be aware of the action taken, and obviously to alert others who may experience a similar situation. I mean, you'll hopefully see from within the report itself as well, we do have a consideration that the local authority here is in a good place with regards to its cybersecurity arrangements. And you'll see the note that indicates that there is full compliance with our required compliance on the various aspects related to that. And I think it's also important perhaps just to acknowledge, and my ICT colleagues were only presenting yesterday at an LGA event on cybersecurity arrangements. And the police themselves were indicating that that approximately 50% of crime is now related to cybercrime. So you can, you can see, the importance of making sure this is a top priority in terms of preventing any information being compromised.
Thank you, Claire. I think we'd be comforted by the knowledge that we haven't been impacted by any of those activities. I think we need to say very little else about it. Thank you, Claire. Councillor Blake.
Chair, it's a very quick point to make. I think that we should take into account, I think, with the terms of the data, particularly in terms of complaints, it'd be nice to have some context around the service area that's covering. For instance, a high level, or say 10 complaints about disability badges that are raised is quite a large number compared to 50 complaints about waste collection, which would be 3.7 million collections, I believe, in a year. So, in terms of percentages, in terms of context, that would be very useful to provide, I think, if possible. I appreciate that's a huge exercise, but
sure.
Okay, let's move on. Are we happy to note this report? It's for noting. Anyone not happy? Okay, thank you. That's noted. And we'll move on to 6B, Council Learning and Development. This is page 289 to page 300. Sarah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. So you have a report here, councillors, setting out the requirement for learning and development activity. This is to support councillors to have all the background information, learning they may need in order to make the decisions they're required to do. You're required to do. It's coming to this committee as the overarching committee, but then to all other committees with an amended list of specialist learning for that specific committee. We were hoping to sort of raise the profile of learning throughout the committees, and for you to have a conduit of somewhere that you can go to say that you would require some learning on something specific and that we could provide it for you. So I've set out there some background, a list of the suggested learning, and also as an appendix, the current councillor development policy, which would be updated in time for elections and induction next year. Happy to receive any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Any comments or questions? We're being asked to approve the content of this report and begin to undertake learning and development requirements. Always great when you are having to make a decision about something that actually affects yourself. I always find that quite interesting. Turkey's voting for Christmas, which is not in this context, but comes into mind. Ed.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question. Do you do you have data about which councils have done what? And the competitor in me would ask, can you produce a league table in that?
Yes, Councillor Blake, we do. And I haven't produced it now because we're setting it all out really clearly, and that will be the next quarter's report, will be committee members.
Let's not name and shame though at this stage, are you? Of course not.
Come on, Phil, I've held on to 100% attendance record for this.
Maybe later. Councillor Ward, then Councillor Jarman, then Councillor Quirk, then Councillor Luciani.
Thank you, Chair. I was I the chair? Was that the title? Last year, and I found it useful. You know, having been a councillor for quite some while, but actually to be taught some things that I didn't know. And one of our problems is we don't know what we don't know. And then again, I will think about this last night. And what do councillors want to know? And if you think about what is our role, we've got two roles really. We support our electorate, individuals. That's our main role really. And then we make decisions, policy decisions in council. I felt that for a new councillor, they need to know who do they go to solve their residents' problems. I think that's crucial. And I know quite recently in the last year or so, we've put out organisation charts, so you know who's doing what. But that's fairly new. But I think, we need to keep that up to date. So, because, you know, people come and go and so on and so forth, and exactly what they do and how do you get hold of them. But obviously the statutory stuff that we've got to do, you know, we all know that, don't we? You know, we have to do the environmental stuff and so on and so forth. But that would be the only recommendation I would make, is that we have to focus, include the stuff that a new councillor needs to know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ed. Points well made. Chris.
Yeah, this came up in another committee yesterday. And although we've got the list of training for this committee, of course, every committee is now having a training list. And yesterday we saw, for example, the training list, the first draft of it for the pension committee, which is pretty good. I thought we were very happy with that. I had a few more things to it. The issue that did come up was about the regulatory environment attached to some committees. So some have it at a stronger level than others. So for example, we have on pensions and we have on planning statutory requirements for certain training that has to happen before you can be on the committee. The question before us was whether that requirement should be on councillors before they're eligible to be nominated as a substitute to a committee. Because clearly it's quite possible that somebody would not be trained, but would be nominated as a substitute and might be called on at late notice to substitute when there would not be sufficient time for the training. So my recommendation was that all councillors on committee and all substitutes should be required before they're nominated to a committee to have completed the mandatory training of that committee. That's often quite a low hurdle, by the way, for some of them. But if we otherwise, for example, on planning and pensions, you might well have people being nominated who would then not be able to sit until they'd completed at least that mandatory element. Thank you.
I've got you, JP, but I've got a couple of other things. Okay, then bear with me, Chris and Karen, JB.
Absolutely see the sense of that, but I think possibly nomination is the wrong point. Otherwise, we could have a problem next annual council. And everyone's arrived, new people have arrived, and they're being nominated at the first meeting. So, and to some extent, I think what that does happen, for example, on licensing, which I'm chair of, I know that a member cannot sit on a panel until they have received training. So I think it has to be a little more nuanced than suggested there.
Thanks, JB. That's interesting points. And Wendy, would you also like to comment? Please bear with me, Chris, while Wendy speaks.
Got the magic touch, they work for me.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Jarman, because you've raised an issue which actually I discussed with our Deputy Monitoring Officer the other day in relation to the AGM and decisions about committee membership and substitutes, and the fact that as soon as through the AGM we are aware who substitutes are, we should immediately provide for the required training for those substitutes, and at least that means that if they then need to be substituted, they've had the training immediately. I think what we've tended to do through custom and practice, certainly for planning, is where a substitute hasn't had the training, we arrange for it before they sit. But in my view, that should be something that we're much more organised with as soon as people are nominated as substitutes.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you both for that. Chris.
People come in as new councillors with all sorts of different backgrounds and experiences. And maybe where we should be starting is actually with a skills and knowledge audit to actually be able to identify with individual new councillors where they need general training, and if they're going on to specific committees, the specific training that they need to undertake for those committees. We had a recent meeting of the licensing committee subcommittee, and we had a new member who quite clearly didn't have a clue about licensing protocols and what you can and can't, and it doubled the time that the meeting took because they didn't understand that. It's important to actually allocate, and some of that training probably does need to be mandatory. I mean, it is on planning, and maybe on quite a few of the other committees, there should be mandatory training if you want to be on that committee. And the other thing is not naming and shaming, but I think we should be giving people a bit of encouragement about what the skills are available. We get something comes around and it says, we've got a new training course on this, and you put it in a pending and with good intentions and forget about it. And even I do that, and I suspect my training record's better than most. So I think we maybe need to keep a record, and which we do, but use the record that we're keeping rather than just it being sat on a shelf.
Thank you, Chris. I guess at page 291, for our service committee, there's essential learning, a list of them. What you'll notice, so that's deemed the essential learning for us as our committee. You also notice on the recommendation is that any new learning to be added to the committee requirements should be discussed and agreed by this committee. So if this committee deems that there are other areas of learning that should be undertaken by committee members, it's up to us to bring that forward, suggest it and get it put on. But you'll notice, of course, it won't work, it's hard copy, but click here for the Learning Hub. We'll take you through. I guess you log in with your details. That's how they know whether you've been on or not, Chris. Got to log on. Karen.
I was going to highlight that point, how do you get onto things? But the other thing I've noticed, there's a lot of things that I've actually got higher levels from another job, so I can just send them to you. So if anybody else has got them as well, if they're higher and you've done them on in your outside job or anything, you can still send it, and you attach it to our learning, don't you? So make sure that everything you've done really that's applicable, I think, goes through to HR and they make a note of it.
Karen, I'll come to Chris. Sarah,
Um,
I'll come to you after.
Yeah, on that point, the Learning Hub enables you to go on the My Learning tab and you can update anything. And then absolutely, if you've got learning that supersedes this learning, you can update that and we'll just tick it off. Absolutely. Yeah. So either you send it into us or you can do it yourselves through the functionality of the Learning Hub. The other thing about the skills audit, that does go out to new counsellors as part of induction. And the only people who can mandate learning for you is you. So as officers, we cannot mandate learning. So I think it's down to, we use words like essential, but actually it's the power is here to say we're mandating it and we're saying we will do it and we recommend it to other committees.
Well, in a moment, we're going to decide to do that, I hope, and commit to that training. Chris, I'll come to you after, Jeff.
Yeah, so I think Sarah's got a great job here, and I think it's probably long overdue. There is a corollary to this, which is that we do need to be a little bit cautious when we look at some of those training lists. They can be a disbarment from people who would like to serve on a committee if they are particularly onerous. And I'm not too sure where that line will be. That'll be for Sarah to work through. But clearly, we're not expecting everybody on the pension committee to be a qualified investment advisor or an actuarial qualifications, although that would be quite nice. But certainly we do need to be cautious. We don't want to stop people being on committees. That's the bottom line. We want people to be able to serve on committees and to be useful to this organisation. Thank you.
I think Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think I probably should, because I probably take a slightly different view about training for councillors. I'm in my last term, my 5th term. I was elected with Ian back in 2005, which I did loads of training in my first term, loads. And yet I came in here knowing how this council worked very well. At the same time, there were 28 new councillors. It was the Conservative clean sweep, wasn't it? We didn't have a clue what we were doing. So I had a fantastic 4 years. I got loads done. I knew most of the staff and I knew how this council worked. And I did, it was fantastic. And I've done very little training since then, to be honest. When I joined the planning committee, I've always engaged in the planning training. I've avoided the pension fund committee like the plague, similarly licensing, because it's just not what I want to be doing as a representative for my ward. One of the, and if you produce a league table, I'll be bottom, because I haven't done anything in, well, apart from planning training, probably haven't done anything in 12 years. I remember having a session with a former member of staff who was supposed to be my training mentor, who we identified, it was well before your time, I suspect, Sarah, as to what might be helpful to me. And we identified things. I never heard another thing again. I thought, well, that's learning for you as a councillor. But probably because I was an opposition councillor on my own most of the time. The issue we have now, everything's on the Learning Hub. I don't have access to the Learning Hub. I don't have access to the Isle of Wight Council's website as a councillor because I don't use an email address because I prefer not to. I'm a confidential councillor. I don't want anybody monitoring my emails without my permission. So I avoid that, and I've always used a private email address. So I have no idea what's on the Learning Hub. I get the emails, etc. And I'm not the only councillor who doesn't use an email account on the Isle of Wight, on the Isle of Wight site. But I suspect they probably do have that access. But I don't have it, and it's probably too late now because, as everybody knows, I've been talking about it for 4.5 years now. I'm retiring next May, so it's all too late. But just bear in mind, and I think Chris Quirk said it, we're all different. I don't think you can mandate people to do things unless it's statutory. People make their own choices. I've made my own choices. I think I'm, you may all disagree with me, but I think I'm a very capable councillor. I know how this place works, and I still generally, as Ian said, know where to go to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. That's noted. Sarah?
I just say you don't need a council email to access the hub. It's a web-based, that's fine. But it, just to be clear, it's a web-based applications, which is why we're enabled, outside partner agencies to use it as well as internal staff. So
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to move on nonetheless because we do have a recommendation that committee approves the content of the report. Thank you for that. And begins to undertake. Jeff, so login once will do it for you. Undertake the learning. I'm not trying to undermine any of this. I'm just saying. Learning and development required of them. Any new learning to be added to the committee requirements should be discussed and agreed by committee members. Look, I need a proposer and a seconder for that. Somebody's going to propose. Thank you, Councillor Ward. And thank you, Councillor Bacon, for seconding it. Let's move to the vote. Those that are in favour of that, please show. And thank you, that's unanimous. Let's move on to 6C, the local transport plan 4. It's a verbal update and it's from Stuart, who's here this evening. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as agreed by the Economy, Regeneration, Transport and Infrastructure Committee, the consultation for local transport plan 4, the Island Transport Plan, commenced on Monday the 1st and runs through to, just get the date up now, the 24th of November, a 12-week consultation by which time we want to garner the views and the input from the island as a whole. So we would have, all of the members here should have received an email from me as one of the key stakeholders for the island, as well as members council. And I've done that for many other key stakeholders, but also we're going to engage with the communities. We've got 7 community engagement events across the island, and they're spread out across the days so that we're giving the opportunity as most as we can for the public to engage. Plus, we've got 2 online sessions as well, where we'll be encouraging those who are not able to make it to the events in person to come along and make representations. So again, by all means, councillors, please do come along, please do engage. We do want to hear everyone's views on this. At the previous committee, it was identified, and Councillor Jarman quite rightly pointed out some necessary amendments to the demographics and statistics that are set out within that. We've made some of those amendments, but further amendments will be made during our review of the consultation, the feedback and the document itself. So it will be coming back to this committee early next year. I believe it's either January for approval to take it to full council for final adoption, but this will be examination of consultation responses as well as the revised version of the LTP. I just want to make sure that the committee is aware, and by all means, please engage with the consultation. We've got lots of messaging going out. We've got social media messaging going out. We've had press releases going out. We're doing those in-person events as well, with a lot of information on display boards, and we'll be putting up others at community centres as well. Just encourage that feedback. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stuart. I know it's a long time coming. I know also that some of the delays have been due to government who refuse is my word, not their word, who didn't give us the guidance that we needed to bring it forward. And it's been a long process up till now.
Yeah, it absolutely has been. And, you know, it was a wish of this council that we brought this forwards, you know, over 4 years ago now. And it's taken that time. What with COVID, the change in the government guidance, which as you say, never did arrive, and it's been necessary to revise. And some of the issues that previously picked up was because the original draft was produced in 2022 and things have moved on. But as I mentioned at the previous committee, and to others as well, as we move towards the potential for devolved government, devolved local combined authority, it means that this is our opportunity, the island, to get our plan, 15-year plan in place ahead of that, so it could be considered formally by the mayoral combined authority as it comes together. Otherwise, unfortunately, we lose the voice. It will be alongside the local transport plan 4s, which have already been adopted and are in place for all of the other constituent authorities. So this is our chance to make sure that the island is represented, because we have got unique challenges and we've got things that we need to tackle on the island different to others. There's commonality across the piece in some areas, but we have got our unique challenges as well that we need to tackle.
Thanks, Stuart. Anyone want to comment? It's a verbal update. Chris?
Thank you for that, Stuart. Very useful. Could you just tell us, please, what the process will be for publicising the results of the consultation? And could you just inform us if you've got these seven, I think it was 7 events, just where and when they are? I'm not too sure where that's being publicised at the moment, but I think we'd just like to know. Each of us will probably pick up very quickly when you say something in our area.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. The consultation responses will be summarised in a report, and then they'll be tied directly into a consultation version of the LTP, so people will be able to track exactly where those consultation responses have been addressed. We'll make sure that in the summary report those are addressed, but also within the document they'll be able to see where that is made in those amendments. So that's what's being commissioned and applied, and that will be produced for committees to consider at a point in which we go, this is our, like to see as the final draft. In regards to the consultation events, we have got the first one kicking off on Monday, the 15th of September, and that's at the Riverside Centre here in Newport, 3:30 till 6:30. Then the very next day, the 16th of September, we're at East Cowes, where we're there from 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. Wednesday, the 17th of September at Freshwater Memorial Hall, 11 till 2. Then we're off to a bit of a gap. Then we're off to Aspire and Ride. We're there from 3:30 till 6:30 in the evening that day. Round to Cowes Community Club, the 9th of October, 3:30 till 6:30. And then Salisbury Gardens and Ventnor, 11 till 2. That'll be the 4th of November. And then the 6th of November, we're at Sandown Methodist Church, 11:30 till 2:30. And then we have our online consultation events, which are Wednesday, the 8th of October, that's 10 to 11:30. And then Monday, the 3rd of November, 5 p.m. till 6:30 p.m. And we've tried to be geographically representative of the island to ensure that we engage as many of the communities as possible. But obviously in some areas like the Bay, we pitch to one area to ensure, a bit like the Bay area, is represented in some form. But we've done what we can to ensure that we've got that coverage.
Thanks, Stuart. No further questions. Thanks for that, Stuart. Good luck with consultation. We'd like to hear back when we have some more information, and we're interested in the when it comes for a decision later on or beginning of next year, potentially. Let's move on to 6D. It's financial monitoring, draft outturn 24-25 and Q1 25-26. This is pages 301 to 318. Is that you, Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so before you have the outturn report for last financial year and the first quarter's financial report for the current financial year. It's a noting report. Obviously, it's in 2 parts. If we turn to last financial year, first of all, so you'll notice that the good news is that there was well, this is all subject to audit, of course, so that the accounts have yet to be audited. But the outturn for last financial year is an underspend of 3.6 million. On the face of it, that's good news, but I think we need to put that into the context of the budget that you approved back in February. So when you approved the budget back in February, you may recall that we had to significantly increase last year's budget. So we were facing financial challenges around social care amounting to 11.9 million. As a consequence of that, in your revised budget for last year, you added a further £7 million to the council's contingency to complement the existing contingency to be able to cover off that level of forecast overspend. So whilst on the face of it, it feels like a good news story, and it is because there is an underspend, the only reason it's an underspend is because you added so much to the budget at revised budget stage. The way that we funded as a council that additional £7 million was in large part by drawing on the council's reserves. We drew down £4 million of the council's general reserves in order to supplement the budget. So that's important context for when I come to speak about how the proposed underspend is to be used, which is the next part of the report. So the next part of the report informs you that the proposal for the use of that £3.6 million is to replenish general reserves by 1.2 million, not the 4 million that was drawn down, but by just 1.2 million. It proposes to add £500,000 to the transformation reserve. And you may recall that when you approved the budget back in February, all of the transformation reserve is fully committed. So this will give you £500,000 within the transformation reserve as we work through the budget process for next financial year. And the final proposal is to put £1.2 million effectively into net 1.9 million pounds. Sorry, did I say 1.2? 1.9 million pounds into next year's capital programme. So you may also recall, keep saying that phrase, that when you approved the capital programme for new starts for the current year, we had a really lean year for new capital starts. That will have a knock-on effect as we move into next year and the demands that you will receive for new capital investment for next financial year, even for things that are about keeping operational services running. So that's the thinking and the rationale behind the proposals for the use of the £3.6 million underspend. Happy to pause there, Chair, if you like, before I go into the second part of the report, which is the Q1 financial position for the current year.
We wore it out yesterday.
There you go. I'll start again. Apologies. Sorry, Chris, you will recall that we were planning, that the full council agreed that we would use 250,000 from top up the Community Capacity and Resilience Fund to 250,000 as a first call from the revenue reserve for capital. And I'm wondering whether that is occurring.
Your memory is better than mine, Councillor Stewart. My recollection would have been from the transformation reserve. That's how it was funded in the first instance, but you may well be right. I would suggest that you look at the overall financial position in the round when you come to the budget process this year. That is always a decision that you can make when it comes to the budget for 26-27. And if you did take that advice, you would be then making your decisions on a fully informed basis on what the overall financial position of the council looks like. I think it might also be helpful for me to talk to you about what Q1 looks like, because that isn't looking as favourable as we would have hoped for the current year. So that's obviously part of the financial context that you ought to consider when making budget decisions.
To answer your question, Nick, it didn't sound like it, but
It was an answer. I'm grateful for that.
any further, it's for noting. Any further questions on that? Chris, can I ask you, in conference with the committee members, we would like to start the budget process with some informal meetings, if that's possible, with you and your team or whoever it is, probably 2 weekly, probably a Thursday, but I'm not getting into the exact detail, but those were some of the suggestions, and probably on the Thursdays that are not when we have this committee meeting, something like that anyway. I will look at the detail, but in principle, what we're asking is for some fortnightly meetings informally to discuss the budget. And so if we can arrange that would be really helpful. And the second thing is we would like at some point an approach to this that starts with a zero change to the existing budget. So with no percentage savings. We're just like as a base. Is that something possible to do?
Everything's possible, Chair.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
yes, happy to. I mean, it's very sensible. It's really it's a good planning principle.
Yeah.
But yes, the 2 weekly meetings sounds fine. Obviously, we'll seek to accommodate what the committee can manage. Zero is a challenge. Starting with zero is a challenge, but we'll be able to discuss that in the meeting.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. That's really, really helpful. Thank you. Any further comments, Chris?
Thank you, Chair. So, Chris, as well as I'm sure you're going through the process with each of the departments at the moment, looking for their suggestions. It's good that naught will be one of the options they can reply with on your new template. So we'll wait and see what the implications of naught and the others are. But we also had a discussion about other aspects in preparation for the budget cycle, and specifically within the corporate environment. And this is a question I'm going to put to Wendy now. She hasn't had formal notice of this, but I think it would be very helpful if we could have your assistance with some outline of how a figure, let's say £500,000, for example, could be part of the savings regime going forward with the next budget, taking out costs primarily associated with contractors and consultants. So I'll leave that with you to think about. I'm not expecting an answer by any means now, but I think that would be a very valuable contribution to the total thinking that we're going in, certainly in that direction anyway. And I'm aware that a lot of those, as you know, Councillor Jordan earlier pointed out, are legal costs, but there are an awful lot of other contractor and consultancy fees which are not legal. And I'm sure there's some capability there to use the expertise that we already have within officers rather than always turning outside. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Further comments, Jeff?
Obviously, thanks, Chris, for your report. Obviously, the draft outturn for last year is pleasing, but there's something within it that does concern me quite seriously, and that's in adult social care, which, although it had an 8.2 million overspend on its budget, but there was less than it could have been because of a £1.6 million savings, described mainly related to staff vacancies. And I noticed in this year's first quarter as well, staff vacancies continue to be rolling forward in dealing with the most vulnerable people in society. Now, it's almost like we're becoming dependent on that, which worries me to a large extent. Now, I know that relates probably more to Adult Social Care Committee and their concerns, but it concerns me from the point of view of the finance as well, that it's hard pressed adult social care, put money in, and yet we're not spending it all because presumably we can't get the staff, or we're deliberately not employing the staff. Which is it? Can anybody give me any sort of assurance? Thank you, Chair. I've got other questions as well, if you don't mind, but we'll deal with that one first.
I'm back to Jeff. I don't actually, Laura's online. Which shall I? Yeah, Laura, do you just give us some comments on that question from Councillor Brodie, please?
Of course, Councillor Jordan. In relation to the vacancy savings money that comes through in the budget, it's largely driven where there are vacancies between a person leaving us and a new person joining. The current staff complement is carrying a relatively low vacancy rate, but what we see is the gap between a person joining and a person leaving, or alternatively, where we advertise, for example, a more senior role and promote internally from within our own cohort of staff already, and we then carry the second vacancy for a little bit longer. We do know we've struggled to recruit and retain professional staff across the Adult Social Care Directorate, and I use the term professional staff meaning all of my workforce, regardless of which role they undertake. They're all professionals within their own field. That is a national picture in terms of shortages for care work staff right across the country. We've invested heavily in growing our own staff, and when we budget for finances, we budget at top of scale for people. Because we're growing our own, people are joining at a lower scale, so those savings are available to us at this point in time. We're also looking at ways in which we can complement the staff that we have with alternative solutions, and we've just invested in a program called Magic Notes, which is in essence AI to support our teams. It's reducing the administration time that professional staff are needing to do by around 30%, so releasing 30% of their capacity to do the jobs that we employ them to do, working with vulnerable people in our community. So we're also seeing dividends there in terms of the savings we see attached to the staffing budget. It's our intention to review that staffing budget probably in next year, so that we know that the staffing budget itself is right from the outset of the year. But to do that, we need to stabilise the workforce we have and to ensure that the changes that we've made, the additional support that's been put in place, is the right support to ensure that members of our community get access to the services they need at the right time. I hope that's of assistance.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thanks, Laura, for that's very helpful indeed, and gives me a level of reassurance. Thank you. Can I ask another question, please, Chair? Yeah.
Please do, Chair. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
it relates to the capital budget, Chris. I mean, it's notable to me, and I mean, I think we see this quite a lot, the amount of slippage that there is within the, it's about our ability to deliver really. And again, this is probably relates again to Laura as well, the amount of slippage in the disabled facilities grants, I mean, which is significant. And I'm always aware as a local councillor of the demand on that from older residents, and yet we don't seem to be able to deliver it. And it's about capacity. I know, the capacity of this local authority, but it is concerning. And you go through the capital programme, and I mean, the bottom line, in terms of the capital budget this year, 101 million pounds, and at the moment there are still 87.5 million pounds left. I mean, I know it's only the first quarter we're looking at, but it doesn't seem as if we've seen this in the past, and I'm concerned that we set a capital budget, we're dead chuffed, whoever the administration has been in the past is dead chuffed about it. It's all bigged up in a media release, but we don't actually deliver it, do we? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. Actually, I'm not sure. Do you want to deal with that, Chris?
I can deal with it. I can deal with it in part. I mean, Councillor Brodie, you're absolutely right. Every year there's slippage in the capital programme, and that's that's a matter of record, really. I personally think that some of it is to do with the way that the capital programme is estimated. So I think there's a degree of optimism sometimes in the way that it's estimated. So sometimes it's not necessarily a you can't read into slippage as being lack of delivery, but you can read into it that it's probably a combination of lack of delivery and over optimism. I don't think we've seen anything, as far as I'm aware, that is a significant detriment to the council associated with the slippage, and certainly we haven't had any of the capital programme that is externally funded where we've had to return funds that are of a time limited nature of any significance. So I think I can answer it in part in terms of it is a combination of things, but sometimes we just need to be better at how we profile the capital programme forward across years.
Thanks, Chris. Any?
It's interesting you used a a phrase, no detriment to the council, because of course there is a very large amount in the capital programme. Although my favourite line, isn't it? Affordable housing. And the immortal words of our Director of Finance, subject to business case. When can people without a home, without a roof, without shelter, expect there to be an acceptable business case? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well,
It's not me that makes it.
to be fair, there have been a number of acceptable business cases that have come through the year, and we have pursued a good number of new affordable housing. So we have been utilising the 50 million. I know it's not a message that any councillor wants to hear. The economic circumstances are really, really challenged. On the whole, to be able to deliver affordable social housing, probably need 50% subsidy. If the council were to provide that as 50% subsidy, either comes from the council's cashback capital resources that are almost entirely devoted at the moment to delivering statutory council services, or it comes from the council's revenue budget, which you will know is already challenged, because that means borrowing that then has to be funded by the council's revenue budget. There's no provision for additional borrowing in the council's revenue budget, so it has a consequence on the council's ability to deliver its statutory services. But it's obviously it's a choice of prioritisation for the council, but obviously to be mindful of what the impact is on council services, whether that be in terms of capital investment into statutory services in the main, or the delivery of day-to-day statutory services by the council.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Chris. You know, I mean, I won't pursue it now, but you know, I mean, we maybe again in informal meetings, but it is consistently the most pressing issue as far as I'm concerned for this local authority. Certainly, as long as I'm on this council, I will continue to raise it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. Just before I come to you, Chris, if I may, Laura, do you just want to comment on that? Because there have been some moves with housing, as we know, I know about anyway. Just want to explain that to the committee, perhaps, please.
Happy to do so, Councillor Jordan. So with the support of Chris's team, we've been able to advance a number of successful capital bids, and those bids have seen us purchase the 15 properties in God's Hill, seen us secure the larger size houses at Horsebridge Hill. We've been able to facilitate 4 stock transfers from registered providers to the local authority, so future-proofing our provision around homeless accommodation, emergency accommodation and temporary accommodation. And most recently, the case that's progressing, the business case that's moving forward, is for the veterans accommodation. So there are business cases that are being advanced that are delivering bricks and mortar accommodation for our most vulnerable residents.
Thanks, Laura. That's helpful information. Chris.
So a 4% average capital appreciation on domestic residents is over a 10-year period. That's a doubling of the value of the property. Given that that would represent 50% now and 50% through capital appreciation over a 10-year period, would it be fair to accept a business case based on that 10-year period?
No, because unfortunately capital appreciation is not cash in the bank, and cash in the bank is what pays the debt costs. I can't pay borrowing costs with a notional appreciation in capital value.
Although it is a book value for capital appreciation, which is a doubling of it. So your original investment would only be 50%. Would that not qualify under your criteria?
No, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't.
If there was an exit strategy at the end of that 10-year period, you would realise that capital value.
I would, but if I did, I'd have to then I'd have valuation risk associated with the future capital receipt. I'd have to rely on that capital receipt coming in and that disposal actually taking place in order for then that capital receipt to be the cashback subsidy for any new affordable housing. So I'd be relying on future receipts 10 years hence.
on a rolling programme?
Possibly, but that's not, that is not generally seen as a prudent model for financing new capital expenditure, because it's speculative and fundamentally based on valuation risk.
And past data, because 60 years of history of that. I'll just say, Chris, just say. It's not a guess. Jeff?
I just realised I didn't really get a response about disabled facilities grants. Perhaps Laura could give me a response. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll come to you after, Ed. Laura, Councillor Brody did make did ask a question about the disabled facilities grants. Are you able to give us some further information on that, please? You're on mute, unfortunately. It's okay.
Or not, unfortunately. Many people wish they had the opportunity to mute me at will, I'm sure. In relation to the Disabled Facilities Grant, I can provide assurance that the budget is fully committed in each year. The slippage that you see is in terms of the works taking place in people's own homes, and for a variety of reasons they can be delayed. As part of the DFG process, there are occupational therapy assessments which help scope the best and the most future-proof solutions in people's own homes for the adaptations that need to be made. We then work with partner builders on the island who come in and are selected by the people who own their own home. In some cases, we need to get permissions from landlords to be able to progress those works. So at each stage of the process, there is unfortunately and regrettably a risk of delay, and we see those delays carrying forward. But the budget is fully committed in year. The slippage is in the physical spend, and that takes place normally in the first quarter of the following year.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, thank you. Ed?
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back on a point made about the capital appreciation not being able to take into account. If you were in the real world house builder, you'd have multiple opportunities to refinance at different stages of development, and the value would have varying levels at different stages of development. Is there any flexibility in terms of accessing different calculations at various stages of development?
What we were talking about earlier, I will come to your question, Councillor Blake. What we were talking earlier in relation to Councillor Jarman's question was about a future capital appreciation. So a deferred income, if you like, an income that you would receive 10 years hence. In the interim period, if we've actually laid out cash, we've borrowed, and we've got to make the borrowing repayments. In that interim period, I've got nothing in the budget to be able to pay for those borrowing costs. So that becomes an additional burden on the council's revenue budget for that period. When it comes to refinancing generally, we have the opportunity to refinance, bearing in mind that the levels at which we borrow are based on government gilts, so probably about the lowest level of borrowing you can get with a margin above government gilts. And it's a 0.8% margin above government gilts. You can refinance that, but if you seek to refinance, there'll be early penalty charges. And even with our current borrowing portfolio, we always look for refinancing opportunities to see if we can replace more expensive borrowing with cheaper borrowing, and taking into account the early redemption costs associated with redeeming that borrowing early. That's something that we do as a matter of course through our natural treasury management planning, and there are rarely opportunities to refinance at a lower rate because of the way it interacts with the early redemption cost.
Supplementary, please, Chair. If that would be relevant if you were treating them all as the same product, in terms of, say, you were to build 100 social houses and finance them as such, that would be the case in terms of the income off it would have to be serviced to service the debt. However, there is plenty of opportunities to maybe say sell 10 of them to alleviate some liquidity in the scheme, and then various points you could adapt the model in order to make the numbers work better. I say that's what a developer in the outside world would do. I appreciate that we are under different constraints and that there would be, and that the it's not a mortgage as such in terms of it being more towards a gilt. But I think that there are different ways of looking at it and being more creative in terms of being able to make the numbers work based on the fact that we've got X amount to put in and we want a product at the end of it.
Fundamentally, trying to bridge the 50% subsidy with a marginal change on borrowing, that's never going to bridge the gap. We're never going to be able to tweak a borrowing model by a few percentage points and that cover a 50% gap in the ultimate funding, of an acquisition. And when I say acquisition, I mean it in its broadest sense, whether that's a build, whether that's a acquisition off the secondary market. But fundamentally, there is a massive gap between cost and what you can charge in rent to be able to cover the borrowing associated with that acquisition.
I appreciate that. As I said, the point I'm trying to make is that you're trying to get over a cash flow issue in the short term initially, certainly up to 10-year period. And there are many ways to skin a cat, as what I'm saying.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Chris. I think what point's being made, we won't label this too much, point's being made is why isn't it part of a business case? Not the specific 4%, Chris, necessarily. That's what I'm hearing anyway. But why isn't it a consideration as the overall part of the business case? I'll come to you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I've answered the question about capital appreciation because it's not bankable. We are under a requirement for when we borrow, we have to set aside a certain amount of for the repayment of that debt each and every year. We have no choice about it. So it's not just a cash flow issue. It's I have a statutory responsibility to set aside at least 4% of any borrowing that I undertake each year. And then I've got the interest cost on top of that. The interest cost is a cash flow issue. The setting aside of the 4% is an actual charge to in your world, the profit and loss account. In our world, the council's income and expenditure account. It's not something I have a choice over.
Chris, thanks for your patience.
I'll just have one more go at this particular thing, and then I'm sure you'll want to move on, Chair. The old adage of residential property development was always based on 1/3 build cost, 1/3 of land cost, and 1/3 of profit, effectively. Now, I agree these days the profit element might have been squeezed somewhat, but this goes to the essence of what we're trying to use the capital monies for, allied with land which the council already owns. And in that model, we have the capability to take out the land acquisition cost, 1/3. We have a capability to take out the profit margin for a large percentage of it. That's 1/3. So those 2/3, leaving only the build cost, not qualify for your 50%. I think in most books, 66.66 recurring is bigger than 50. And is that not sufficient, even if there are additional costs associated with that might squeeze that back a bit? Is that not a model which you would allow as a business case?
If that were the truth, I would allow it. But I don't think that that is the reality. I mean, there are many examples of negative land value. And I'm not sure that those proportions still prevail in the current market.
Just the land value in that you're right, Chris, going back, but it was quick thumbnail, third. That was, yeah. What's happened is the build costs gone up and the land values come down. The land value's nearer 20 or 25% of the overall cost. You're not far out, but it is out, roughly speaking, generally on average.
It's still zero if it's our land already.
It most certainly is. I'm not undermining anything you're saying. I'm just correcting the percentages. I absolutely agree with you.
As much as I like the debate, yeah, we undertake any financial evaluation, we look at real cash flows. We don't look at anything that's hypothetical. We look at what the actual real cash flows associated with any proposal are. Nothing of it around it is assumed around percentage land values, percentage rents, percentage build costs or anything like that. It's what the actual cash flows are. So we do a real appraisal as opposed to a hypothetical one.
So, and if I hear that correctly, what you're saying, so £1 million on Public Works Loan Board, £80,000 a year roughly, current rates, you would, £1 million would fund 4 houses, 5 if you're lucky. That would make it £16,000 per property per year. That property would have to generate £16,000 worth of loan repayment to even begin the business case. Have I heard that right?
That is one of the key cost components. The actual servicing of the debt is a key cost component. The setting aside funding for repairs and maintenance is a key cost component. Setting aside or making some allowance for voids, if there are any voids, non-payment of rent, they are other components. And obviously, and did I mention repairs and maintenance? And repairs and maintenance. They're the key components of an evaluation. It's how much rent do you have left to service your debt once you have made an allowance for repairs and maintenance, management of the property as well, because it takes a bit of management, and for any voids or bad debt. And that's where the shortfall arises.
It will be the final question.
I did
We're
say the
gonna
last
move
one was,
on.
I apologise.
I like you find this fascinating and interesting, and I'm sure we're going to revisit this. I'll allow you one more question. When we're
Very kind. So in Portsmouth, with an acquisition that was done there, I believe the Homes England component was 40% towards the cost. Are we not able to achieve that sort of capital input to our programs on the island if they can achieve it in Portsmouth?
I'm not sure where that 40%, I've not heard of that, and I think I ought to have, but I haven't. But it is a snatch your hand off moment if you get the opportunity to take 40%. On some of these smaller schemes, I think there is. You're right, actually. Through the local authority housing, yeah, okay, that's on. Yeah, there's some. Yeah, there are some small scale housing schemes where you can get 40 to 50% contribution, and that's some of the examples that Laura gave just earlier where it's happened on the island. But when you come to large scale schemes, it's a different proposition.
What was sorry, as a follow-up to that, what was the Portsmouth acquisition? Was it not 800 or some very large number of units?
Okay, so there was a Portsmouth acquisition, and it was around about 800 or over 800 properties, and it was from a RSL. And as a portfolio, the acquisition cost was heavily discounted compared to if you'd have bought each of those properties individually. So that's where the value was in terms of that as an acquisition cost. So you weren't paying full value as if you were to buy those individually. If you bought them on a portfolio basis, there was an opportunity. Even in that scenario, if memory serves, there was a cash flow deficit for at least 10 years before there was break even in terms of the rent, less repairs and maintenance costs, less management costs, less voids, less debt costs. There was an annual deficit running for at least 10 years. Fortunately, the housing revenue account could sustain those deficits for that period to take the longer term gain for the positive cash flows for the remain for the following, say, 40 years.
Okay, thanks. It's fascinating how Portsmouth, but you've got about 7,000 properties, I think, in Portsmouth, something like that.
It's 16,000 properties.
In part, that's what Laura did in a much, much smaller way with the houses. Okay, look, we're going to move on. Thank you. We'll come back to this. Fascinating. I find it anyway, fascinating. It's for noting. We're happy to note that. No reason not. Let's move on to 6E, Local Council Tax Support Scheme. Is that Laura or is that you, Chris? Yeah, Chris. There you go. And you got one afterwards as well.
Okay, apologies. I think you might get bored of the sound of my voice at some point during the evening. But so what you have before you is a report that seeks your approval to consult on a local council tax support scheme. The proposal seeks to consult on a scheme which is no change. So it goes out with the existing scheme, but obviously it will seek to answer questions from residents about how they feel that that scheme should be amended or retained. Important context around this is, first of all, you'll probably be aware that the local council tax support scheme really only applies to working age claimants. Pensioner claimants can receive up to 100% support, and that will remain all the time. That's part of the mandatory part of the scheme. So it only relates to working age claimants. The context of this, of course, is that you have to go out and consult on something. Once the consultation comes back, you can then choose to make your you can then choose to make your decision. You're not restricted around what that decision is. One of the rationales for obviously going out with the council tax support scheme in its current form is that the council will have I would suggest, a minimum savings requirement for next year of 2.5 million. You have probably read in the previous report, I didn't come to the Q1 on the previous report, but on the previous report, Q1 is showing a £3.4 million forecast overspend, mainly in our social care area. Nothing else changes. That 3.4 million overspend will add to the council's savings needs for next financial year. So the 2.5 million that we set out in the budget report in February, which we suggested would be required as a saving for next financial year, is now disadvantaged by a potential further 3.4 million if that 3.4 million can't be managed. And we also, at this stage, do not know what the outcome of the local government funding reform is. We have been through 2 stages of consultation now. The second stage consultation closed a couple of weeks back, for which we made a response. And you will understand some of that because we had an informal session with you all around the local government funding reform. So there are some really quite serious headwinds that we have in relation to the council's potential savings requirements, certainly some significant uncertainties. So the prudent thing to do is to go out and consult on the existing scheme. Doesn't prejudice you in any way in terms of what your decision might be in December or January, once you've got the outcome of the scheme. But I think it's probably worth me saying, and it's interesting, Chair, that you asked me earlier on, could we look at the budget process and start with an option that says naught? I think we should also I agree with you, we should be scenario planning, but that scenario planning should move from naught, 2.5 million, 3.5 million, and 4.5 million. That is the range of potential financial outcomes that I think we could be looking at next financial year. That's important context for the local council tax support scheme and the consultation, but also worth bearing in mind, and we just have to know this as context, is that this used to be a fully funded scheme by government. I think it was back in 2013-14, it was transferred to the responsibility of local authorities. When it came to local authorities, it came with an immediate 10% reduction in funding, which all local authorities had to accommodate. If we roll that forward now and look at the cost of the scheme versus what we believe the implied funding for the scheme is, we have got a funding gap of about 3.6 million. So it's really quite, the burden that has fallen on the local taxpayer is really quite significant for something that used to be a fully funded scheme. That's important context just in terms of the overall financial position of the council when you're asked to approve going out for local council tax support on the basis of the current scheme.
Thanks, Chris. Any comments or questions? We are making a decision on consultation, not on the actual scheme. Chris, are there any key changes that you've made to this from last year that we agreed last year? Bearing in mind, members, we've reduced over a number of years, reduced the number, but increased the support over the number of years to where we were. I don't think we changed it last year either. I can't remember.
Yes, you did. I think you've had 2 consecutive years where you've increased the maximum support. So I think a couple of years ago, it was maximum support for working age was 65%. It's now, following 2 consecutive years of 5% increases, it's now 75%.
Is that the only change? That's the change.
That was the change that you implemented for this financial year. Yeah.
No other changes, Chris?
I'll ask Erin. We might have made some minor changes to fall in line with universal credit.
Yeah, we did make a couple of minor changes to the scheme last year in terms of, like Chris is saying, to align with universal credit, also to create an earnings disregard for people working, making it more beneficial to be in work, which again is in line with universal credit. We also introduced a disregard for childcare costs so that we weren't taking any income that claimants received to cover their childcare costs into account when we calculated their entitlement. But this year, the proposed scheme makes no changes whatsoever. We just want to keep it absolutely static as it is.
We'll do that for that 0% budget increase, Chris. Keep it all as it is. Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Chris, thank you for that. And yes, I was going to mention that we'd seen it increased. That was something that we were very happy to see. You also mentioned within the report the indebtedness issue, that some number of people, even at the 25% level, don't necessarily pay it. Have we seen any changes over the last couple of years? Has the indebtedness level gone down because we are?
No. Yeah, there's a table in the report that says that it hasn't, despite the increases in the maximum level of support, the overall collection of council tax from those in receipt of council tax support has been broadly the same.
Thanks. Ed, Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. In the consultation previous years, we've had a lack of options described that has effectively affected the decision we've been able to make as a full council. My request last year was, can it be open-ended or more options added to the consultation so it gives us as councillors more options in order to make a change potentially, not saying we should, that what is given out by us as a council. So for instance, last year we couldn't go above 75% even if we wanted to. Does the open-endedness of question 5 get round that, or would we still be hamstrung by the options given out in this consultation as to what options we can deliberate over during full council?
Sorry, in terms of the way the consultation is framed, you're not constrained in terms of any decision that you might take. So you would be able to take decisions around multiple different options.
A 1% reduction, what sort of values? I should be able to do that in my head, but I haven't done it. What's it roughly?
I can tell you what 5% is. It's 370,000. So yeah, it's 370,000 divided by 5.
Per percent?
Per 1%, yeah.
370,000, third of a million, 3 cents a million pounds. Ish.
Yeah. Ish. 5% is 370,000. Yeah.
It's sorry, I didn't hear, I must have misheard. Thank you, it's just helpful. Councillor Blake, I'll come to you, Chris. Councillor Blake, are there opportunities to undertake what Councillor Blake's suggesting that gives us wider opportunities when we make the final decision on this in the consultation?
Yeah. What the council needs to do is it has to go out with a scheme to consult on, a single scheme to consult on. That doesn't fetter your ability to say, on the basis of the consultation and what you hear, to say, okay, we would like to increase the maximum support by 5%. We would like to increase the maximum support by 10%. We would like to reduce the maximum support by 5%. It doesn't fetter your ability at all. So you'll have all of those options available to you. But you do have to consult on a single proposal.
Cool, Chris, we make this decision before budget, isn't it? Isn't that part of the problem? We have to make a financial decision that then has to go into the budget process, or maybe I've misunderstood that.
No, you haven't misunderstood that. So if, for example, you said and gave an indication prior to the budget that you wanted to, for example, let's just use history and what's happened. You wanted to increase the maximum local council tax support for working age claimants by 5%, extra 370,000. Your savings requirement would go up by 370,000. That's how it would operate. When we come to the next item, there's a rationale for going out with this consultation at the same time as going out with the budget consultation, because there's a relationship between local council tax support and the budget. And it gives you the opportunity to have the widest consultation around local council tax support and the council's budget simultaneously at the same time.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Jarman, Councillor Jarman.
So if I look at the roughly 3.5 we talked about earlier in terms of the on-us cost for Isle of Wight Council for the support scheme, and that an additional 5% would be 360. That's well within the additional 5.4 that you're anticipating generating from the homes premium, isn't it?
It is, but the homes premium is already fully taken into account in the council's budget in the current year and future forecasts. So there's no additionality to the council so now associated with the council tax, the 100% council tax premium, because it's already been brought in.
But the only differential that could be taken into account is if the collection rate was higher than anticipated.
Right. If the collection rate is higher, whether it be to do with the council, the 100% premium, or whether it to be with council tax as a whole, then that has a positive impact on the council. But we tend to, and that affects what's called the council tax base. And we project forward on the council tax base generally on the basis of average change in the council tax base over the last 2 to 3 years.
Supplementary, if I could. So when you mentioned cash flow, with the cash flow with the local town, parish and community councils, they give us their figure. We pay them that at the very beginning of the year, and effectively we are then funding that for them for the year. That's the case. Is that still the case? And is there an opportunity to revisit that so that we are aiding our cash flow situation by providing them, let's say, with their amount of money over 10 equal months, or even 12, to balance the payments to them as the payments are received by us?
Yeah, there would be, if we change the profile of how the payments to the town and parish and community councils are made, and we made it monthly, for example, there would be a cash flow benefit to the Isle of Wight Council. That's money that is in the Isle of Wight Council's bank account and is temporarily invested, earning a rate of interest. Obviously the opposite of that is the reduction, the lack of opportunity then of the community, town and parish council to earn interest on the funding that they would have otherwise received earlier.
Interesting. How much roughly, off the top of your head, can you remember, do we pay town and parish councils? sounds like it might be 15 million, something like that.
We think it's about 6 or 7, but we'd have to check. 6 or 7 million. Yeah, we can come back to you on it if you'd like.
But it would come out, it would come off of our borrowing requirement, because instead of holding it as cash, we'd take it off the borrowing. So but we would not have the borrowing to fund that. And then the corollary would be that they would not have it to invest. But that would be to our advantage as a local authority, and it would balance the payments to local town, parish and community councils. As indeed most of ours is collected on monthly payments anyway.
That is correct.
It sounds like it's complicated calculation here, but it sounds like you might be starting at the start of the year, retention might provide £100,000 of interest. Councillor Bacon.
But just following through that, that would have an impact on the town and parish councils, and that would probably lead to precept increases to make up for that ability to raise money that they lose through that revised scheme. So as far as residents are concerned, probably has a detrimental effect upon them.
Yes, Joe.
But it will allow us to maintain to a better level the services we've got, albeit that we don't have the fundraising ability beyond the cap to raise that money to maintain those services. Where, sorry to stretch the technical point, whereas the local town, parish and community councils do have an ability to raise that precept. So it would be, instead of us seeking to raise additional money, they would effectively be raising it to save us the money so that we could use it for primary services. That's the idea. I don't want to press the point, Chair, but I think everybody's got the notion.
I'll get the idea, Chris, don't worry. Any further, we'll move on. Any further, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, very briefly. It's an interesting idea, but there are two issues. The first one is that the reputational the problems with town and parish councils and community council are already existing, and therefore it's something that we would need to take into account. And the second thing is also that we would have to, unless I'm much mistaken, have to consult with them over a fairly extensive period. So it's unlikely to have any effect until the following year.
Perhaps for another day, it's worth, I absolutely understand reputation damage. I could equally conjure up on a bit of paper some interesting ideas about taking that 100,000 and borrowing £1 million, 1.2 million, and buying 5 houses with it. Here we go. Let's move on. Oh no, sorry, we can't move on. We need to, the recommendations that this Policy, Finance and Resource Committee agree to undertaking the consultation period based on the proposed scheme as set out in Appendix A. And secondly, and I'll take these into, I think we're probably in agreement, that this Policy, Finance and Resource Committee delegates authority to the Director of Finance to make any minor editorial or typographic changes to the consultation document for publication. I'm sure we're in agreement with that, but those in favour, can somebody propose? Thank you, Karen. Councillor Bacon seconded. Those in favour of that? The show. That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Sorry, we'll move on to item 6F, budget consultation 467-2478. Press size. It's over to you again.
Yeah, hopefully shorter introduction to this one. So this is, again, we're seeking your approval to go out to consult on the main budget consultation. Notably, this time round, this is 4 months earlier than we have historically gone out for budget consultation. One of the reasons for doing so is obviously the interrelationship between this and the local council tax support scheme. And you'll notice that there is a question also proposed in the budget consultation that references the local council tax support scheme. So it gives you the opportunity to have a holistic view on the consultation around both local council tax support scheme and the overall council budget at the same time, seeking residents' views and other stakeholders to be able to inform a proper position for you. The consultation itself is set out in Appendix 1 and it's there for your consideration and hopefully approval.
Thanks, Chris. Any comments about this? No comments. Chris, then, therefore, can you just explain, there is, or proposed, the government have made some noises about changes to financial settlement dates and the period that they're going to financially settle with us. You want to just explain to the committee what that might look like?
So obviously as I mentioned earlier, we are going through this process of consultation on local government reform. As I said, all councils or all councils that chose to have now responded to the second consultation, which was quite detailed. The government have indicated that they might be providing the outcome of that settlement with individual local authority settlements by the end of November. Who can say? It's possible. So if we do, that would probably be about 3 weeks earlier than normal. We hope that we see it that early. It would certainly help in your deliberations because that is, as I mentioned earlier on, that is a key variable when it comes to what are the level of savings that the Isle of Wight Council will need to make next year. If it comes back and it's very favourable, it potentially reduces the level of savings. If it comes back and it's not favourable at all, it increases. But obviously that's also in the context of this other variable that we have at the moment, which is the Q1 forecast £3.4 million overspend, which would also add to the council's savings requirements going forward.
That said, Chris, they've promised a funding review. So if I've had this correct, they not only they're going to give us an early settlement idea, but a 3-year settlement, but also they're going to take into account our submissions on fair funding. I mean, that's true, isn't it, Chris?
I certainly hope so. We spent a lot of time and effort making submissions for the fair fund, because this is the local government reform is the fair funding review, and we've gone to extreme lengths to make the case for the island, particularly around what we all call the island case and a better funding deal from government. The encouraging thing is that within the second consultation, they recognise this concept called remoteness, which is what we had been looking for in terms of a future funding settlement. How that turns into pounds, shillings and pence is the bit that we don't know at the moment. So, and it's only one element of a very, very large review of every single funding allocation that comes from the government. So we won't know until that period, which is either end of November or probably mid-December. But you are correct, we are expecting a 3-year settlement. The first 2 years, I think, will be more certain than the 3rd year. So, yeah. So I think you can only assume that the following 2 years are indicative. What will also happen within any settlement, because there will be, whenever there's local government funding reform, there are winners and losers. So the the kind of trade press at the moment are suggesting, you may well have heard this, that the London boroughs will do worse compared to now. The county councils will probably do a little bit worse. The urban unitaries will probably do better. And obviously we're in the mix of all of that here on the island. Well,
Portsmouth.
who knows? But that's the indications from the experts that have looked at the basis of the way that the government have consulted, on the basis that if the consultation that they've put out actually becomes the reality, then that's what the picture is likely to look like. However, whenever there's winners and losers, there's always a transition period, and you don't jump up or slip down to your new funding level in 1 year. It usually transitions over a phased period of 3 years. And any of you like me that are old enough to remember the last time this happened, there was a local government funding review that had a transition period of, I think it was 3 years, and the third year never happened. I think we may have had a new government.
Politics, 3 years. Any comments, questions? Thank you for that, Chris. And from the committee and from all councillors and officers, thank you for the work. I've seen some of the extensive work that you and your team and other, all of the senior management team and other members of staff have put into putting forward what is a comprehensive, I'll come to Karen, a comprehensive case for better funding for this island. I also, in my own less professional way, put forward a different approach on trying to explain that they could fund it by mile, by kilometre, that because of our travel costs, but it was to explain that detachment really, rather than the actual system. But let's see what happens. It is slightly different because we await it every year, the settlement, but this year there is a fair funding review, and we haven't had that certainly since I've been in the council anyway. Karen, and then we'll move on.
Chris, is there any good news?
The good news is that remoteness has been recognised in the consultation. So that gives us it. I'd rather have hope than no hope. So I think we're at least in a position of hope. That remoteness becomes a factor that's taken into consideration. And the important thing about the remoteness element and how it plays into the formula funding is that it plays into every single allocation, block allocation. It's not just focused on the kind of adult social care block or the children's services block or the highways block or it permeates through every single one.
Thanks. We do need to approve this. I need Ian. Thanks, Ian. Thank you, Ian. Councillor Walls approved. Sorry, I thought we wanted to speak. Councillor Walls approved it. Have I got a second? Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. We'll move on to update on local government reorganisation and devolution, page 479 to 486. I think this is probably Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. It's a fairly short report. It simply is an update on the current position. If I take LGR, local government reorganisation first, councillors, you'll remember that the deadline by which the full business case for local government reorganisation proposals have to be with government is the 26th of September. There are 2 proposals that will come forward from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight area. 2 separate proposals, one that's been developed by Hampshire County Council and East Hampshire District Council, and the second proposal which has been developed by the remaining 12 authorities across the Hampshire and Isle of Wight area, of which we are one. The full paper itself for the proposal that we and the leader have been involved in working on has actually been published yesterday. Paper copies of that, it's a substantial document, and paper copies of that will be put in each of the group rooms. We'll send round separately a link to the full business case and the appendices, but then obviously they will form part of the formal paper that will come to you in full council on the 17th of September in any case. It is an extensive document. It is an extensive piece of work. as we move through to the September full council date, and we develop summaries of the document and more information, those will be shared widely with councillors as well. In terms of devolution, things are maybe not quite as solid in terms of timescales. We are awaiting from government confirmation on the financial elements of the devolution arrangement for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight, called by government Hampshire and Solent arrangement. Those are promised within the next couple of weeks. We are waiting confirmation of a summary of the statutory instrument. The statutory instrument is what will be placed before Parliament to enable a combined authority to be created, should the upper tier authorities in this area collectively agree that they wish to move forward with an arrangement. And had we had that information by now, we would have been potentially able to debate devolution at the September full council as well. It is unlikely that we will be in that position because the papers have to be published next week. We have provisionally reserved a date of the 8th of October, subject to confirmation by the chairman that he has liaised on that date with all of you. We have kept it early in October simply because our November date is too late for government. We asked them if we could take a decision at that time, and they came back and said that they were hopeful that they would be placing before Parliament the statutory instrument prior to that date. So they wanted a decision from councils in advance of that. And they said that the end of October would be an opportunity, but of course the last 2 weeks in October are half term, so we are trying to keep away from dates where we know there are school holidays and councillors will have other demands from families and diaries. So that's the kind of update in terms of the timescales for progressing decisions on both local government reorganisation and devolution.
Thank you, Wendy. Any comments, questions? Councillor John.
Microphone.
Can I just confirm it was the 8th of October?
There's been a discussion prior to this meeting. This committee might want to suggest that if it were possible to look at an alternative date, the 1st of October.
1st of October.
To look at that alternative. Who was first? Sorry, Ed. Okay.
Just want to make sure you're aware that on the afternoon through to tea time on the 8th in this room is the pension board meeting.
We'll look at an alternative date. Because I don't know if it's possible,
adding weight to, I think, your suggestion, Chair.
Ed, and then I'll come to you, Ian. Ed.
A couple of observations. Back in a corporate scrutiny meeting, I think it was, the leader, you committed to producing either a weekly or a bi-weekly report into any dealings you had with any either the dealings with LGR or devolution, including if that was nothing of particular note. I don't think we've received one as of yet.
I think I've sent every single document that I've ever had around group leaders and non-aligned members. Every single document.
Documents, yes, but you go on these meetings that we aren't privy to any of them, and you committed to providing report on the content of those meetings, even if you in that time period you hadn't had one or there was nothing of note. It was a commitment from yourself. As one observation.
Okay, I'll look at that, but then the outcome of my meetings are those documents. But anyway,
I make an observation that when I speak to colleagues from across the water, they seem a lot more, should we say, informed than a lot of the councils on the island are. That's just simply an observation. Another point in the significant implications part of this report. there is no mention of the severe amount of staff hours that are being given to towards LGR and devolution, and it is grinding some departments in this council to a halt. A point that the residents of Ventnor will be very quick to point out that is already a very slow process in this council. So I say that needs to at least be alluded to in these, because it is a significant implication on this council.
I'll reiterate, local government reorganisation and devolution are government policies that we are obliged to carry out. And the commitment we make is the commitment to comply with those obligations of government policy. So this is not decisions that we have made as a council on the Isle of Wight to enter into local government reorganisation or devolution. We did make a choice about devolution in the sense of the priority, whether we went first or last, but we didn't decide about devolution because devolution is happening across the country, and so is LGR. So, I mean, our commitment, in terms of cost, LGR, it's being funded, but I take your point about staff capacity. But I'm not quite sure how we deliver our obligations without inputting that staff capacity. I don't know, Wendy, if you want to comment on that at all.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Blake. There has been staff time input to that. We've tried to minimise the input of time so that we've done so only releasing officers where they've confirmed that they have the capacity and the capability to release their time to take part in those meetings. I think there are two things I'll take away from this. If it is having that direct impact on delivery of services, then officers need to come back to me and say that they don't have the time and the capacity to do that work. And I'd look to find a way to deal with that in a different way. But secondly, in both the reports on LGR and devolution that come to full council, an element of assessment of time that it's taken will be part of the financial implications of the decision making separately.
Thanks. And if I just add on LGR, we've been willing listeners for a long time because, as you notice on LGR, the options that are coming are proposing the Isle of Wight remains the single unit authority it is. And we spent many hours listening to extended debates from districts and borough councils on the mainland, trying to sort out who goes where and with who, and it's been quite illuminating to listen to at times, but has required less input from Wendy and I and other members of our team. We've been very willing. Devolution slightly different, but on LGR it's been less commitment by this council. Any further comments or questions? It's for noting. We need to note this. Any comments on that? Come on, Ian, please.
It's only a very minor one. We were talking about meeting dates. I'd just like to tell you that the Conservative Party conference is between the 5th and the 8th of October. So some of us will be away.
5th and the 8th. We'll see if we can get it in between the 5th and the 8th. Thanks for giving us the heads up, Ian. Change your holiday, Jeff. Thanks, Ian. Look, we need to know it. I think we're going to note it. There's no further comments. Thank you all for your comments.
Yeah, I mean, in response to that, I do think it's important that as many councillors as possible are available for this meeting. And I think that should be taken into account. It's one of the most important decisions this council will make in a long time. And it's not a scheduled meeting. It's not in people's calendars. People will have other commitments. So it's as much consultation with the groups and individual members on availability as possible, please.
Jeff, thank you for that. For very pertinent comments. Absolutely agree with you. Once again, we're at the behest of government, unfortunately, on this. And it's been like that with devolution from the start. And we've always been up against timeframes that haven't necessarily fitted our own organisation very well. But your point is very well made, Jeff, and that's very well noted by us all. We'll do our very best to make it the best date that we can with the most people available. So any time between the 4th and the 8th of February. Sorry. Let's move on to our committee work plan, receive and consider.
We've had two consultations, one in the spring and one in the summer. What are the arrangements for publishing the results of those consultations?
LGR.
The LGR documents, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
I sent those documents around yesterday, I think, or the day
Yesterday?
before.
Okay.
If you look at the appendices 1, it's the result of the consultation.
Okay. Yesterday.
We'll move on to the committee work plan, page 487.
Yeah.
Any comments on this? Anything to add, subtract? Nothing. Okay. No comments. We'll move on if we're okay with that. Yeah, we're all okay with that. We'll move on to members' questions. Thanks for your patience.
Jack,
Yeah.
can I just make a suggestion regarding members' questions? It strikes me that with all the committees, that we're getting a lot of questions from members who then don't turn up to ask their question and are not online. We spend a lot of time, the chair, reading the question out, reading out what is quite frequently a very long response. We never used to do this ever in the past. Can I suggest that if the member isn't present or online, that the question is just noted and minuted and made available to the media, you know, so as they see the answer, etc., etc. So tonight you've got 5 questions and there's only Councillor Quirk and Councillor Ward here. So can I suggest that we do that and make that a practice in the future? Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Jeff.
sorry, Councillor Clerk as well. Sorry, apologies. Right, no, you've got to remember
The spirit of the questions well received, Jeff. I'll be honest with you. Before you spoke, I was reading. The first one here. You know, is this really? We're councillors. We have them in front of us.
Yeah.
Is it really? It goes on the other side even. This one. I mean, do we really want me reading this out and replying? No.
Certainly if they're not here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, certainly if they're not here, but just in general. And these are published, aren't they? They're published, the questions published, the answers published. Shall we agree to, you've got the questions, you've got the answers, and we move on? Yeah. Anyone disagree with that? Well, let's. Yeah, but look, we're going to come on to members' questions. These are written questions, Ed. So the floor will be open after we've dealt with those. The floor's open to members' questions.
Sorry, last time I was prevented from asking a verbal question, but that's by the by. I just wondered if you were allowed supplementaries to the written question.
Yeah, well, let's do that. We're happy with that, Ed.
Chair, the rules do say that questions must be on notice. That's what everyone.
Oh,
and that's what.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get. Would you just explain that?
Yeah, Chair. A member can ask a question without notice relating to a matter on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, you must have given the notice or have the consent of the chair for the urgency.
And is that in the supplementary as well?
A chair point of order. Obviously, if we've got to the end of the meeting and we've still got questions on the content of the meeting, I suggest they should have come earlier in the day. If members' questions is going to be at the end of the agenda.
Certainly did it say there was a quite a long agenda, but let's just assert this. But look, in general, we're councillors, and this is proof that it works. You can put your question into the committee and get an answer. If questions come in late, it's difficult to understand why they come in late and weren't asked earlier. There may be reasons for it, but it's difficult to understand that. And on verbal questions or supplementaries, they need to be about items on the agenda. I mean, I think that's very clear. Would you want to add something to that?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yes, there are supplementary questions for persons that have put a question on notice. And just another point in relation to the order in which questions are held, there was going to be a suggestion taken to audit and governance as to whether there should be a routine change and appear at the end as it used to, or should it remain at the start as it currently does? So we were going to take that to members for their view.
Are you happy with that, Ed? I'll just ask you a question.
I'm perfectly happy. Obviously there's holes in the processes, and I think that's where a lot of members are falling into various different holes. It's all well and good having members' questions at the end, but then you can't invite any verbal questions if you can do that, because theoretically they should have been asked during the meeting. That's the only caveat to that would be is if a member such as Councillor Spink has turned up tonight asking a question in retrospect of something that had come up on the agenda. So there needs to be some ironing out of the holes that are created by the various processes.
Thank you. That's fine. I'll come to you, Jonathan. Let's, if audit are going to have a look at this, let them have a look at it. But I would suspect there will be arguments for both cases, but beginning or at the end. And I think at the end it will be a decision. Today I made the decision to chair this meeting, but in fairness, I asked you all not only in the meeting but before the meeting. But I'm happy to be guided. Jonathan.
Just as we're mopping up a few issues, point of clarification, really. The urgency provision, this was mentioned briefly in the meeting, the informal meeting earlier. Perhaps some guidance from Mr. Thorne. One would assume that urgency means that it's something that could not have been raised within the normal timescales. So for our meeting, if it was possible to answer the question by 5 p.m. on Tuesday and put it in writing, then it can't be urgent, and it's only matters that have arisen since then. Say there's been an accident, something has happened in the last 24 hours, whatever, makes the matter urgent. I wonder if you could clarify what the interpretation is.
Chair, I'm not wishing to dodge that, but that is a judgment for the chair of the meeting.
That is dodgy.
Well, I'm happy on this occasion to make a decision on that, but I do think that needs resolving. I think Jonathan makes a very good point that the question isn't urgent just because it said it's urgent. If it could have been asked before the 24-hour, I mean that's a matter of fact, isn't it? So the urgency only comes from did the occurrence about the question, the issue of the question happen in the last 24 hours, and if it didn't, it isn't urgent by definition.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yes, last time I asked an urgent question because I hadn't had a response to a series of questions from you until within the 24 hours. Today, we had a question from Councillor Spink sent by we haven't got it in front of us by email, which could have been asked a week ago, to be frank, in my opinion. And we've got another one here that you appear to have accepted from Councillor Jeffries, which doesn't look urgent in the slightest. It says quite very clearly in bold, submitted and accepted by Councillor Phil Jordan as urgent. And it's about something that could have been asked at any time, really. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Thank you, Chair.
Any further comments? I think the explanation for that is it related to another question, and therefore the urgency came because it relates to that question. I take your point, Jeff, that it potentially could have been asked earlier also.
Point of order, it was in relation to a motion that didn't actually end up appearing on the agenda.
But again, Ed?
The question was in relation to a motion that didn't end up on the agenda, not to a question.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I'm not dodging that bullet either. I agree. It remains.
Chair, you haven't explained that the motion isn't being dealt with tonight.
So
sitting on the agenda.
No, so Yeah, exactly. I'm just coming on to it. You're right. So the answer to this is that I am reliably advised, if you wish, because it's been sent to me, or maybe you look it up, the Constitution is very clear, our Constitution is very clear that matters of parking relate to the ERTI committee, ERTI committee, and not this committee. And in this case, I believe that we could not say that it has any financial implication at this stage, because there isn't a parking policy in effect. It would require a parking policy and strategy to be undertaken. Once it was undertaken, due consideration by the ERTI committee of changes that made the car parking regime different, may or may not have financial implications for the finances for this council, and until we got to that point, it would be impossible for this council to understand whether there are financial implications. For that reason, I suggest that this is referred to the ERTI committee. Who's going to speak? Ed, and then.
Can I just point out that I've been trying to get this point aired for so long that the policy has run out in that time. It's been,
20
to say it's clunky is an understatement, the process.
It's out of date, the parking policy, parking strategy. Jeff.
Yeah, just to say you've been using an acronym that if anybody in Ventnor decides to view this meeting subsequently, they won't have a clue what you're on about. So can you explain what an ERTI is?
ERTI is the Economic Regeneration, Transport and Infrastructure Committee, ERTI. Thank you, Jeff. You're absolutely right. The ERTI committee, and we're the committee. What?
Just for complete clarification, can I confirm that what you are saying is that as a committee, you are in agreement that you are referring the item about parking strategy and implications for Ventnor to the Economy, Regeneration, Tourism and Infrastructure Committee, and we will add it to their work plan?
Yes. Councillor Spink's question, I will not answer that this evening. I don't believe it is urgent. I believe it requires a reply and a response, but not under urgency of this committee, either verbal or written. And therefore, I suggest that to get this committee to reply to that, we have a written question for our next meeting. Well, look, that is it. We've come to the end of the meeting. So it remains for me to thank you all for your input, for your commitment, for your attendance, for our officer support as always.
The outcome, we're not allowed supplementaries to our questions then.
I think we agreed that you are entitled to a supplementary, Councillor Blake, yes. Yeah, please do. Yeah, please do.
So I've looked over your answer, and I get this is government policy, but obviously this is something that we voted on as an Isle of Wight council, and that I really have to stress, the exceptional circumstances that Ventnor is under right now, and surely it's something that we've put in place. We have ability to evolve it in some degree to suit our area that we're in.
In terms of this committee, we need financial oversight, but I did try to explain that to make adjustments to parking isn't really in the remit of this.
Sorry, I'm supplementary to my member's question. I appreciate it's been very confusing.
Oh, I see. Will you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So I've read through your answer, obviously, and during the content of this meeting, I appreciate that you're saying it's a government thing, so that it's it's come with its own set of policies. However, it was implemented by this council, and I really must stress the exceptional circumstance that the Ventnor is in. It's one of the reasons why I voted against it, and I think I was the only councillor that did, because I could see the knock-on effects, particularly in my ward. And obviously, we are here to represent our ward's views. There must be, I mean, I'd like to think there is some form of mechanism we've got to create exceptional circumstances, particularly around a policy that we have implemented. Therefore, we must be able to adapt it somehow.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, just in terms of point of clarification. So when the 100% council tax premium scheme came in, we were issued with a number of exceptions, and this is one of the exceptions, but it's a 12-month exception. So if there are residents that have a second property that are subject to the 100% premium, but they're in the process of selling their property, then they get up to 12 months relief from that. If it extends beyond 12 months, then there is no relief, and that's a national. The exceptions are national exceptions. They're not anything that we have discretion about. The areas where we do have discretion in terms of council tax are what is called the council tax discretionary reduction in liability policy, but that is generally targeted at those that are in exceptional financial difficulty. So it would be, I think it would be problematic to seek to use one of the council's discretionary areas to cover or to effectively circumvent a nationally imposed exception. But our policies are generally around exceptional hardship, where we've got discretion around council tax. We've got limited discretion because it's a national scheme, but where we have, it's generally around hardship.
To highlight an example, one of my residents has inherited a flat in Ventnor. It counts as his second home. He is on universal credit, very, very hard up bloke who lives up in the north of the country. He is got a ticking time bomb of a flat that has had no viewings, coming to a stage in February. I think whenever it comes, I think it's February. When it's been on the market for more than 12 months, all of a sudden having a 100% increase on his council tax that he has not budgeted for. He's inherited this property. It's a liability in itself. There are exceptional circumstances exacerbated by the situation in Ventnor, which in some part is down to the dealings of this council. So I say that there is hardship being created from an imposition that this council is not a government. It is a government instrument, but it's not a government mandated instrument. And I say that's the concerns that I've got of residents, and they are numerous. Now that Leeson Road's back open, this is probably the most numerous complaint I have.
I think in those circumstances, they should submit an application to the discretionary reduction scheme, because if there's genuine hardship, then you would expect them to qualify under that scheme.
Thanks for that, Chris. Jonathan.
It's a question. It relates to, I hope, to the agenda, because I would like to say something to follow up to what Councillor Blake has said. I've had some experience through personal contacts of this situation. In all fairness, I think it's wrong to say that Ventnor is particularly prejudiced in this. I think a lot of people are prejudiced in a lot of areas. And I wonder, if you want this in a question somewhat, whether there should be some process of compiling thoughts to go back to government about potential adaptations to the availability of exceptional circumstances. The one I've come across is that the 12 months applies. Now, I thought, and a friend came to me and said, what can I do? Well, 12 months, it must apply from when the scheme came in. But no, it seems it actually applied from when the property went on the market. So I'm aware of someone, this is a location on the mainland, who put their property on the market in, I think it was March 2024. the sale fell through, I think it was April this year, maybe a little bit before that. But because their property had already been on the market for 12 months, 10 months, they got 1 month's exception. And then from May, June, so I've got my dates a bit muddled, they've been paying the double rate, although their property has been on the market and unable to sell. Different area, different circumstances, but similar problems with the property market, which are in many areas at the moment. But that, to me, strikes me as very unfair, that there is an exception that has been backdated effectively. So in that particular case, the person got 1 month of the exception, and then they've been liable ever since, and the property market remaining what it is, have been paying through the nose unfairly. So my question is, can the council perhaps look to gather evidence of these sort of circumstances, obviously local to us, not from the mainland, that could be put to government to say there are perhaps needs for more discretion to be available in terms of the exceptional circumstances scheme to cover situations where the property market is a difficult one, whether for national or local reasons or whatever it might be.
Thank you, Jonathan. We will take that away. I'm happy to write. I'm happy to engage with both MPs. I think it's be a long process and probably unsuccessful, but that wouldn't prevent us from making approaches. What's your view, Chris?
I think you need to take a view as a committee. You know, it's something that, because, you know, obviously there'll be individual councillors that have got experience of difficulties. There may be other councillors on the committee that take a different view. So I think you need to come to a conclusion as a committee about whether you want to gather those representations and then make a representation on the basis of what the, you know, what the different considerations are in relation to that policy. And I think once you've come to a conclusion, I think that's then the time to say, okay, we've come to a conclusion that on balance we think we ought to make representations. These are the representations we want to make, and then they're made, as opposed to, you know, because we just got to be careful that this is a decision of the committee as a whole. Is my point.
That's a good point. Thanks, Chris. Jeff.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Chris is absolutely right there, because I mean, Chris immediately said, well, they could apply for exceptional hardship, you know, in the case that, and I think that deals with the occasional cases that come to our attention here. And as long as we're prepared, making sure that people do have real access to that fund, it's okay. I'm not so sure about lobbying government to go through MPs, because that's just raising hopes that will never happen, to be frank. It's, you know, frankly, it's a waste of officers' time. So I would oppose that suggestion. And Chris is right, it would have to be a democratic decision. And I would urge people to vote against doing that and to rely on the Exceptional Hardship Fund. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll go to you, Chris.
Yeah, so I'll declare an interest now, because I just realised I got one on this relating to Ukrainians, because I'm still hosting them. So one of the discretionary elements that we've got on the scheme is that we don't charge the premium on homes which are let out under the Homes for Ukraine scheme to Ukrainians. I believe that's still correct. Otherwise, I'm in deep doo-doo. It is. And that scheme has just been extended by a further 2 years. So I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that our dispensation will also be extended by another 2 years on that scheme for residents who are letting out their homes to Ukrainians under the Homes for Ukraine scheme.
Yeah, so under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, as long as you've got an occupant in your property, you wouldn't be subject to the second home premium. So yeah, so if they vacated and nobody else was moving in, it then becomes a second home at that point.
Nick.
Very briefly, there is a team within the council who work with empty homes and available properties to try and release them to people who need to rent, and we all know there is a major problem of that on the island. I assume that that would also apply to something related to second homes as well.
Look, I'm going to draw this to a close, and the reason being is what we slipped into is a debate when we've had a question that should have had an answer, and so we need to be very careful about that. What I would say is, points been raised. If this committee believes that there is an issue that it needs to discuss, we'll put it on the work plan, and it come back to the committee to discuss. I think I agree somewhat with Councillor Brodie in there's been a suggestion that in the small example, small cases that there is a mechanism to do it, but this committee is free to choose what it wishes to discuss. And if you wish to do that, and I'm not going to have a long debate about this, but if you wish to do that, we will put it on the work plan and bring it back as a discussion piece for a future committee. Just give me an idea and we'll move on. Well, what do you feel?
If I, as the person who raised the question, I agree with Councillor Brodie. It might be, it would be a wasted exercise. But yeah, I say that there just needs to be an awareness of that there is a lot of exasperating circumstances, and you know, for instance, you can't rent out every property. They have to be up to a certain spec and things like that.
Thanks. Any views, Chris, about bringing it back?
Just a supplementary smile one. I'm quite happy with the written result, the reply. But it says that there hasn't been any request from the MOJ to proceed with the work. I may be wrong, but my recollection is that the work was going to be done within 2 years. And it didn't require any action by the MOJ to ask for it. It was going to be done. I may be wrong. Maybe you could just clarify that and let us know in writing.
But we'll clarify that. My recollection was it was something like done in a reasonable time or something like that. Some kind of abstract, non-ending a period of time, but I may be wrong. We'll check that, Chris, for you. Can I just ask, and then because we're done, are we happy with that we don't want to bring back and discuss this issue about potentially lobbying government over the second council tax? You don't want to?
I think if we as a council can take action, that's fine. Because I was just sitting here interested to hear people's experience, and I suffered the same experience in another fashion. So there are cases where this happens. You end up paying 2 lots of council tax through no fault of your own.
Do you want to debate it or not? No, okay. Yeah, I'm going to close it, Jeff. Thank you all. Thank you all for your input. Thank you for attending. Thank you all to our officers once again. Thank you to Rufus sat in the corner there very quietly reporting the machinations of this committee. We do appreciate it. And we will see you next time. It's 7:38, meeting closed.